Welcome, students. Students, we are discussing about the French Revolution. In the previous class, we were discussing about the Reign of Terror. That was the period when Maximilian Robespierre was ruling. We were discussing how the people they were trembling with fear during this period of Reign of Terror, and later on his own party men also went against this, and they wanted moderation. As a result of this, he was tried in the court, convicted, and he met with the same fate. What is that? He was guillotined. So today, in this part, we are going to discuss how a directory rules France. Students, with the fall of the Jacobin government, wealthier middle classes seized the power. Students, the Constitution of 1791 gave right to the richer sections, the poor, artisans, wage laborers. They didn't get any rights any benefit from the Constitution of 1791, and that led to the formation of revolutionary government under the Jacobins headed by Maximilian Robespierre. And these Jacobins, were particularly the less prosperous section of the society. But with the fall of the Jacobin government, again, wealthier middle class people seized the power. After that, a new constitution was introduced, which denied the vote to non-propertied section of the society. You see, during the time of Jacobin government, a revolutionary government, people above the age of 21, irrespective of their wealth, they were given the right to vote. But now, with the fall of the Jacobin government, a new constitution was introduced, and this constitution now denied the voting right to non-propertied section of the society. It means people, those who are not richer, having no wealth, they were denied the right to vote. It means only richer section of the society got the right to vote. This was the change made after the fall of the Jacobin government. And this constitution provided 2 elected legislative council and also appointed a directory. And that directory is an executive made up of 5 members. You see, earlier the executive was one, under the one person. But here, now, 2 legislative council and a executive body called directory, which was consist of 5 members. Now you see, earlier it was one, that was under the Jacobins, headed by Maximilian Robespierre. But today, it is in the hand of 5 persons. Why did they do so? This was done as a safeguard against the concentration of power in one man. Earlier, the power was in the hand of one man, that was Maximilian Robespierre. And we have seen the impact of that also. How he introduced the reign of terror. How he was ruling that period of time. That is why, to safeguard against the concentration of power in one man, a executive body called directory was constituted with 5 members. However, the intention was not right, not wrong. It was good, but it didn't happen so. These directors, the member of the directory, they were called directors, who were consist of 5%, which is consist of 5%. These directors often classed with the legislative council. Legislative council is the legislative body and directory is the executive body. They classed with each other, and who then sought to dismiss them. This was the period of instability. Directors fighting with the legislative council. And due to this political instability, which continue in France, paved the way for the rise of a military dictator called Napoleon Bonaparte. This was because of the political instability. We'll discuss about Napoleon Bonaparte later on. Before going to see that, during that period of time, though this political instability was prevailing in France, you see, Louis XVI, after that National Assembly, after that Jacobin government, now directory, this was changes made during this period of time. And this was because of the leadership and their nature to rule the country. And that led to political instability. Though this political instability continued in France, still the idea of equality before the law and of fraternity remained inspiring ideals for the people that motivated political movements in France and rest of the Europe. It means, though political instability continued in France, still the idea of equality, fraternity continued to remain there in inspiring the people. As a result of this, many political movements continued after that in France also, as well as in rest of the Europe also. Now, in this part, we are going to discuss, did women have a revolution? Prior to this, students, already we have discussed that in the French society, during the time of revolutionary period, how women were shouldering the responsibility of the family. Because during that period of time, most of the people, they wanted to continue the war. As the people were in war, participating in the war, the task of leading the family life was in the hand of the women. And they also wanted that the war should continue. Earlier already we have discussed. And that shows that how the women from the very beginning were active participants in the events which brought about so many important changes in the French society. It was because of the women's participation in the struggle that brought many changes in the society. So, you students, you see the image, how the participation of the women continued to be a source of inspiration for the people of the France, particularly the men section of the society. Now the question is that, why did they do so? Why they wanted to participate in the political movements? Because they hope that their involvement would pressurize the revolutionary government to introduce changes to improve the life of the women in the society. This was their thinking, that if they will participate in the political movements, this will create pressure on the revolutionary government so that their life will be changed. This was the thinking of the women during that period of time. And for your knowledge, let me tell you, most of the women who were participating in the political movements were from the third estate category. And these women had to work for a living also, because they are not the prosperous section of the society. They were the third estate women who had to work for their living, for the maintenance of their livelihood. What they were doing so? During that period of time, these women of the third estate, they worked as a seamstress, laundresses. They were working like that to earn their livelihood. They were selling flowers, fruits, vegetable at the market. And even if they were employed as a domestic servants in the houses of the prosperous section of the society. How they were working during that period of time to maintain their livelihood? They were working as a seamstresses, laundresses, selling flowers, vegetable, fruits in the market. And even if they were working as a domestic servants in the houses of the prosperous section of the society for the maintenance of their livelihood. And even if you see, this image shows how the women, they stand in the queue to get their ration. So, they were participating in the political movement because of this. And during this period of time, most women didn't have access to education or job training. You know, they were the women from the third estate, not so educated, having no training, job training also. So it means what? Women were not getting education during that period of time? No, they were getting. Women were allowed to do so. But it was not possible for the women of the third estate people. Only daughters of nobles and wealthier member of the third estate could study at a convent. Who were getting so? The daughters of nobles and the wealthier member of the third estate people only could get study at a convent. But after their studies was over, their family members arranged marriage for them. At a tender age also, they were getting married. So this was because of this. At many places of France, in order to discuss the problems faced by the women, to voice their interest, women started their own political clubs and their own newspaper also. At many places, they started forming their own political clubs. What was the reason behind this? So that they could discuss about the problem faced by them. They could raise their best voice through this platform. That is why they wrote newspaper also, in the newspaper also, and started forming political clubs also. You know how many political clubs formed by the women were that time in France? About 60 women's clubs came up in different cities of France during that period of time. 60 women clubs. And you see one of the image, how the women are sitting together in their political club and discussing about the problems, whatever it was faced by them, and they were also deciding the next course of action, how to raise their voice. So for this reason, they formed the political club. And out of these 60 political clubs formed by the women, the Society of Revolutionary and Republican women was of the most famous. Which is the famous women political club? The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women. You know, the intention was to discuss about the problems and raise their voice. And after forming the political clubs, now the women started demanding in front of the revolutionary government. What was their demand? One of the main demands was that women enjoy the same political rights as men. They wanted whatever the political rights were given to the men, it should be given to the women also. That is what? Right to vote and right to contest in the election. So they also wanted that. Because the Constitution of 1791 reduced women as a passive citizen because they didn't have the right to vote. It was a great disappointment for the women. So they demanded that they should be given the right to vote and to be elected to the assembly and to hold political office. Why If the women will be given the right to vote and they will be given the power to be elected to the assembly, what will happen? Then their problems will be solved. Because in the assembly, they could raise their voice. They could share their views. And in this way, they could represent in the new government also. That was their intention. That is why they formed political clubs and started demanding in front of the revolutionary government. So that the government will listen to their demands. Because now you see, because of the 1791 constitution, women had nothing. They were reduced to a passive citizen. No freedom, no rights, nothing. So that is why they started demanding. And after the women political clubs were formed, in the beginning period, in the early years, the revolutionary government introduced certain laws that helped women to improve their lives. Many rules and regulations were introduced by the revolutionary government, which helped a lot to improve the quality in the life of the women. What rules and regulations were made? What changes were brought up by the revolutionary government through rules? After this, the government opened schools. State schools were created where schooling was made compulsory for all girls. Time was there. Education was only for the nobles and the richer section of the third estate people. Now, with the creation of the state schools, women were also given education because it was made compulsory for all girls in France. Now, they could be given proper education. You see how the women were participating in different discussion, in different events, and this shows the implication of their demands. How the life of the women changed. That was the picture showing us. Now, though women during that period of time was given education, but their life was very miserable. Because they were getting married at the tender age. They were forced by their parents. But with the changes made by the revolutionary government, their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. It was continued earlier. But with the new rules and regulations, laws made by the revolutionary government, their fathers couldn't do so. Now, marriage was made into a contract, entered freely and registered under law, which is going on now in our country also. There was no registration of the marriage because women were forcibly getting married against their will. But with the introduction of the new law, this couldn't happen now. So it was the changes made in the life of the women. Now, divorce was made legal. Earlier it was illegal. Now it was made legal. And here it could be applied by both men and women. Men could also apply for the divorce and women could also apply for the divorce. Because now marriage is coming under a contract. With the help of the education, now women could train for jobs also. And they could become artists and run small businesses. You see, earlier they were working in different houses of the richer section of society, selling flowers, vegetables, all this. But now they could get education, get job training also, become artists also, and run small businesses also. So how these changes made by the government, by the revolutionary government? But though all sort of changes were made by the revolutionary government, still women had to struggle for their political rights. You see, it's education introduced for the girls. They were being given job training. They can become artists. Their father no longer forced them to get married. Divorce was made legal. All changes were made. Still, they didn't get the political rights. So, for that, they had to struggle for equal political rights. You know, during the period of reign of terror, the new government issued laws ordering the closure of the women's club and banning their political activities. The new government that ordered to close all the political clubs. How many political clubs were there during that time? 60 political clubs formed by the women during that time. And all those political clubs were closed. And they were not allowed to form any political party more, and their political activity also banned in the country. And even if anyone continued to do so, they were arrested and hanged also. That is what? Guillotined. Many prominent women during that period of time, they defied the order of the revolutionary government, reign of terror, during the period of reign of terror. As a result of this, they were arrested and hanged for their activities, political activities. Still, women continued their struggles for voting rights, equal wages. You know, earlier they were not given equal wages also. And for more than 200 years it continued for their voting rights and equal wages. And the fight for the vote was carried out through an international suffrage movement. No longer it was continued in France. It was an international movement led by the women throughout the different countries of the world for their voting rights. That was during the period of 19th and early 20th centuries. It was not only in France, in different countries of the world also the women continued their struggle for right to vote. during the period of 19th and early 20th century. And this was a set of example of the political activities of the French women which inspired the women throughout the world for a long period of time. And today also, it is a source of inspiration for all the women throughout the world. And at last, in the year 1946, women in France own the right to vote. In 1946, from 1789 to 1946, you see, a long period of time, women had to struggle for their voting right. So students, in this class today, we have discussed how changes made after the fall of Jacobin government, how did women participate during that period of time in political movements, how they were raising their voice, how did they struggle for their equal political rights, and how did they get it. At last, before the completion of the chapter, let us recapitulate whatever we have discussed. I will ask some questions to you. Question 1 is, what is a directory? What is a directory? The answer is, a directory is an executive made up of 5 members. You know, with the fall of the Jacobin government, the constitution which was introduced, that set up the directory, that is an executive body made up of 5 members. We'll move to the next question. Name one of the famous women's political club in France. Name one of the famous women's political club in France. You know, during that period of time, 60 women political clubs were formed, and out of them, the most famous women political club was the Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women. What was the famous women political club? The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most famous women political club of that time. With this, we have covered the part of participation of women in the political activities. The next question is, when did women get the right to vote in France? The answer is, women in France got the right to vote in 1946. And you know, they had to fought a long struggle for their equal voting rights. And at last, they got in the year 1946. So, students, today we have discussed all about the participation of the women in forming different political clubs and raising their voice against the injustice done to them by not giving them voting rights. But later on we saw also how different laws were made that brought many changes in the life of the women. And we'll move to the next topic in the next class. Thank you.